Funding for this program provided by Insurance Council of Texas.
Right now, this storm appears headed for Galveston. You could see a 20-foot storm surge from Hurricane Ike.
Residents of Galveston did not evacuate.
Hurricane Ike began forming 4,000 miles away from the Texas Gulf Coast on September 1st, 2008. It would be the 6th consecutive tropical cyclone to strike the U.S. that year. 3 of these storms would hit Texas. Hurricane Ike would form and take the same path as Galveston's 1900 storm, the deadliest hurricane in U.S. history. Hurricane Ike would measure 900 miles wide. The National Weather Service office near Galveston knew early on that Hurricane Ike would become a serious threat to anyone living on the Gulf Coast.
When it came off of Cuba, it weakened somewhat, but it became much larger and intense. And we have computer models that forecast storm surge, and they were showing 15 to 20 foot surges, potentially near where the eye would make landfall and points north. So we knew it was going to be bad somewhere. There was some uncertainty in the track of the storm at first, so we weren't sure exactly where. But where that storm makes landfall and points north, we knew, given the size of the storm, there'd be tremendous surge.
38 hours before Hurricane Ike made landfall, the National Weather Service issued this bulletin warning the shorelines of Matagorda and Galveston Bays that they could expect a storm surge of 15 to 20 feet. Galveston Island, 12 to 16 feet. Life-threatening inundation likely. All neighborhoods and possibly entire coastal communities will be inundated during high tide. Persons not heeding evacuation orders in single-family 1- or 2-story homes will face certain death.
We do have those statements available for these type of storms. Hurricane Katrina was a case where there were similar sort of heightened terminology. So we don't put those phrases out lightly. We just wanted to get the point across.
Dr. Gordon Wells with the University of Texas Center for Space Research said the National Weather Service was right in forecasting dire consequences for coastal residents living in low-lying areas near the coast.
For areas that are not protected by a seawall, that are built only perhaps 4 or 5 feet above mean sea level, you could see from the model forecast that this was a storm that had a 14 to 20 foot storm surge.
Flooding began occurring in Galveston and other nearby coastal communities 2 days before the storm made landfall. The mayor of Galveston had ordered a mandatory evacuation of the city, but many residents who had evacuated 2 weeks earlier from Hurricane Gustav, which missed Texas, refused to leave. They had heard that Ike was just a Category 2 hurricane. The intensity of hurricanes is measured by the Saffir-Simpson scale. Hurricane Ike was listed as a Category 2 hurricane, meaning wind gusts were expected from 96 to 110 miles per hour. The storm surge for a Category 2 is listed as 6 to 8 feet above normal. However, Ike's storm surge was closer to a Category 4 or 5. With past hurricanes, the focus has been on the storm's wind speeds.
I think one of the lessons from Ike is this category of the storm on the Saffir-Simpson scale is not very useful. It doesn't tell us about how damaging the storm is going to be. So Ike was only you'll hear people say it was only a Category 2 storm. It was one heck of a storm. And the storm surge was, probably the biggest storm surge that that part of the Gulf Coast has seen since the early 1900s. So I wouldn't say Ike was only anything. Ike was a tremendous storm.
The coastal flooding was not the result of heavy rains, but the rising tide, or storm surge. The U.S. Coast Guard had already begun moving their helicopters hundreds of miles away to safety when calls for help began coming in.
The majority of the rescues that my crew did were before the storm, when the storm surge was hitting, and that's what was so surprising. It kind of caught us off guard a little bit too, because we already pre-positioned our assets to safety, and nobody was really expecting the storm surge to hit that early.
As the storm got closer, the water kept rising. This animation provided by the University of Texas supercomputer and the Center for Space Research shows where the highest storm surge struck, washing across Bolivar Peninsula and East Bay and pushing several miles into Chambers County and along the western edge of Galveston Bay.
Okay, Ike tracked right over Galveston and into Galveston Bay. It generated significant surge, 15 to 20 feet over the Bolivar and into Chambers County, also 15 to 20 feet. Galveston Island itself, surge was more on the order of 10 to 13 feet. We also had significant surge along the Galveston Bay and Clear Lake areas. We had about 10 to 13 foot surge through here. Seabrook, Shore Acres were hit very hard. San Leon actually had surges on the order of 15 feet. Turns out northeast facing coastlines had very high surges along the bay. There was a persistent northeast wind in advance of Ike, and that built up some water levels here.
And while Galveston's 13-mile seawall did its job, the city was unprotected from its backside, where bay waters rose as high as 12 feet and flooded 75% of the city's homes and businesses. Hurricane Ike made landfall at 2:15 Saturday morning on 9/13/08. Maximum wind gusts were recorded at 110 miles per hour. The winds damaged almost half of the homes 50 miles inland in Houston and Harris County. More than half of the homes in Shore Acres on Galveston Bay were destroyed. Severe flooding also occurred in Orange and Bridge City. The total number of insurance claims from Hurricane Ike in Texas would exceed 700,000. Hurricane Ike continued moving northeastward through Texas into Arkansas and reignited over Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri. In Ohio, Ike's 75-mile-per-hour winds caused insured losses exceeding $1 billion. Along the Texas coast, it was the storm surge that caused devastation. Oceanfront homes were destroyed in 5 Texas counties from the city of Freeport to Sabine Pass near the Louisiana border. 2 Galveston County coastal cities that did fare well were Lamarck and Texas City. In 1982, Galveston County constructed a hurricane levee system and concrete flood wall that protected both cities from Hurricane Ike's storm surge. But it was a totally different story on Bolivar Peninsula, just across the bay from the city of Galveston. Of the 6,000 homes and businesses on Bolivar Peninsula, Hurricane Ike's storm surge literally wiped more than half of them off the map. The others were heavily damaged. At ground zero here in Gilcrest on Bolivar Peninsula, few homes remain. The owner of one of the last homes standing, Warren Adams, had evacuated. When he returned, he found total devastation everywhere he looked.
If I hadn't have known that there was a hurricane out there, I would have probably have thought that I came back to an area where someone had just dropped a huge bomb, because it was so devastating. When I made that corner down there, when I turned that corner and looked at the beach, it was just, it was hard to even believe. It's still hard. When you look around, there's nothing around.
Adams' home was built on slightly higher ground than his neighbors. It was also built to the new building code. It had a concrete slab, and its ground floor was just above the storm surge. The man who engineered Adams' home, David Franklin, said you can build stronger and higher elevated homes along the beach, but it's hard to protect your house when other homes and debris are washed up against it.
I've been here many, many times, and there's landmarks you look for, and there are no landmarks. It's just devastated, and you can see from these structures here, they were basically all the same. They were highly elevated. There were 12 by 12 reinforced concrete columns, and it appears to me the ones that did not get hit by the debris from the other homes that was in front of them was able to withstand the water and the wind loads, but the ones that actually got the debris load entered into the equation. Basically, this is what happened.
Franklin admitted that it might be just luck that Warren Adams' home is still standing.
And you're right, I think it's the luck of the draw. As you look at Mr. Adams' house down there, he's the only one standing. He was probably the newest house there and best engineered and constructed, but still I think there was a certain amount of luck there that debris in front of him just really didn't cut the piling out from under his house.
Dr. Bob Gilbert, a UT professor in the Department of Civil Engineering, agrees with Franklin, saying the ocean has a way of destroying everything in its path.
But the forces from the water, even with the offshore platforms, which are made out of steel, these are not wood, these are steel, and these piles go down 300 feet, and the structures cost, tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. Even those structures, when the water gets in the deck, all bets are off. The forces are just tremendous. To try to hold something down when the ocean is pushing on it we don't know how to do that.
20 people lost their lives in Hurricane Ike, many of them here on Bolivar Peninsula. Some of those people, feared dead, remain missing. Terry Wade and her husband lived just down the road in Port Bolivar. They had sold their home in Missouri and moved here.
We're at the age, we came here, we spent our savings to build us a nice home and live on this island, and like everybody else, and then to lose it just overnight is just, and it's devastating at our age. How do you start over in your 60s? It's hard enough when you're in your 40s, but 60s, come on, guys.
There were once 2,000 permanent residents living on Bolivar Peninsula.
We were a growing community, nice neighborhoods being built, and children, it was really starting to grow, and then this storm just wiped it all away.
Warren Adams has been staying at his home in Gilcrest while it gets repaired. He said for weeks there was nothing moving in what's left of his neighborhood.
The weirdest thing, I guess, is we're just now starting to see a few birds come back. But for weeks on weeks down here, there was not even a bird, nothing, just desert. Couldn't even find a pigeon.
Laura Elder and her husband Michael Smith both work for the Galveston County Daily News, and they decided to ride out the storm.
Because we're journalists, and you can't cover a storm from another city. You have to be here.
It would have been bizarre for the local media to leave when the national and international media was arriving. I mean, we had a job to do here.
During the night, Laura watched the storm surge pour into her downtown building and rise up her stairs. Both Laura and Michael were prepared for a bad storm, but they hadn't thought of everything that could happen.
I knew rationally that this building wasn't going to come down in a 110-mile-an-hour wind, and I knew rationally that the water wasn't going to get 60 feet deep. So I knew that we were going to be okay, but still there's that kind of irrational part of your mind where you can fear anything that you can imagine, and you can imagine the building coming down, and you can imagine the water getting that high. So I guess when the eye wall was finally getting here and everything was at its peak, we kind of sat in there and held hands and wondered whether we were going to make it through. And I never really thought that we wouldn't, but still you couldn't help but thinking that a little bit.
I want to make that clear that we never were here to have fun. We just wanted to cover downtown during the hurricane. But the fire, and I was terrified when that smoke was black and there was a lot of it and things were catching on fire. And I had this huge fear of this building catching on fire. And he had to go down and turn off the breakers as the water was rising, and I was really worried about that. But that was a moment when I realized this wasn't wasn't something I had calculated. It was a fire, but it's something you should calculate when you're trapped in a home during a hurricane.
While they had their moments of fear, they said it was the conditions after the hurricane that were frightening.
It's the days after that are some of the hardest things that people really ought to think about before they think, oh, I want to stay. There's no power, it's filthy. And that some of the nastiest conditions I'd ever seen and walked through and lived in were on the island. So it was just, that's something you should think about before you think I want to stick around and
nobody,
watch a storm.
Nobody should stay unless they have a good reason for being here. I mean, if you can leave, you should leave. That's just that simple.
Dr. Bob Gilbert agrees. He said staying on a barrier island during a hurricane is a very dangerous thing to do. And after the storm, your nightmare has just begun.
Now what that means is if I live in that home, I'm going to get out of there when a hurricane is coming. And I think the real tragedy, and I didn't say this before, is that some people did not leave. And they were in those homes when those homes were obliterated, and I can only imagine what their last moments were like. But I would hope that everybody understands that when a hurricane's coming, there's no reason to stay. And even if, in the best case, you stay and your home makes it, and you're doing okay, you're not going to have power, and you're not going to have clean water, and you're not going to have a sewage system, and you're not going to have food, you're not going to have a grocery store, and you're not going to have a restaurant to go to. There's absolutely no reason to stay. And I hope that's the lesson that people get from Ike.
Galveston Mayor Lyda Ann Thomas was born on the island. Her grandfather was a city leader that helped bring the city back from the 1900 storm. She said the city was as prepared as they could be for such a devastating hurricane.
Number one, we had a contract with the city of Austin to transport our 3,500 citizens who depend on public transportation out of here on buses that were prearranged. We had debris contracts to get the debris removal people in here immediately, and they came right away and started cleaning up. We had agreements with the light company, the gas company, to get right in here and get going. And it's been difficult for the citizens to understand, but had they been here that early, the opportunity to build back that, to recover just the basic utilities and needs of the city would have been hampered because of all the people here.
Mayor Thomas said it was a hard decision ordering her citizens to evacuate the island, and even harder, telling them they couldn't return.
But the final decision, for instance, to evacuate the island, to ask people to leave, is a very hard thing to do. And then getting them back here, especially in the wake of Ike, has even been more difficult because I could not let people come home when they wanted to. And that was tough.
Mayor Thomas said the city faced serious health concerns in the wake of the storm.
We had no water, we had no sewer, we had no gas, no electricity. And we had the state commissioner of health here, we had the county commissioner of health, we had the whole medical team saying that people were reporting to the hospital with a variety of viruses and illnesses that were being caused by the broken down infrastructure. And we were advised, don't let them come back. It's just not safe.
10 days later, residents were allowed to return, but that was just the first step in trying to bring the city of Galveston back to normal.
Hurricane Ike affected every single service that we provide, as well as every bit of our infrastructure that we use to provide that service. And so for a good period of time after the storm, several days, weeks actually, it took us a long time to restore the primary public safety, public health services to the island.
Downtown Galveston was inundated with salt water, and many of the flooded businesses were uninsured. The University of Texas Medical Branch and its 100 buildings were nearly all flooded with 2 to 6 feet of water. Over 1 million square feet of floor space was damaged. Some of the buildings may never be reoccupied. Hospitals that have treated men, women, and children from all over the world may never reopen. The UT Medical Branch suffered at least $700 million in damage. The losses have resulted in massive layoffs from the city's largest employer.
Where we were before Ike was about a 700-bed hospital, average daily census in the mid-600s. We were pretty full most of the time. We were coming off the summer, which is busy. We have a 120 or so bed prison hospital that we operate with TDCJ, and it stays full all the time. Where we are today is limited services for some outpatients on the campus, very few inpatients, and those are restricted as of today to women and infants. On the 19th of December, we delivered our 1,000th baby after the storm. So we came back up fairly quickly for women's services, but there's not the demand for operating rooms or cath lab or intensive radiology and that sort of thing with that population. So it was relatively easy to bring those services back up quick, but nothing else.
The entire future of the University of Texas Medical Branch remains in jeopardy.
There are, I think, a lot of people that would like to see it built back to where it was pre-storm, but I think most of them realize that we're not going to be the same island we were, and probably not have the same kind of demand for services that we had before. So the downsizing makes a lot of sense.
But for some of the people who had the most to lose, they appear to be the most optimistic. Tillman Fertitta, who owns hotels and restaurants in some of the hardest hit areas, knew Galveston was overdue for a hurricane.
And if you look at history, though, from the 1900 storm to the 1915 to the storms in the 30s, the 50s, I was born during one of the storms, 57 Audrey, and then Carla in 61 and Alicia in 83, and then this one. When it got to 20 years, we knew we were due, because they really run on about a 20-year cycle. And so when it got to 2006, 2007, and we had been 22, 23 years, I knew we were going to get one.
Fertitta's boardwalk in Kemah suffered $30 million in losses due to the storm surge.
The Kemah boardwalk, which is one of the top boardwalks in the United States, suffered substantial damage. I mean, rides that are made out of steel were totally bent because of the surge. Every single ride was either lost or severely damaged. We had restaurants that were just totally washed out, that you never saw the kitchen equipment again. Heavy equipment. In Galveston, we did all right because of the seawall, and I think Galveston will always do all right because of the seawall, unless it is a Category 5 storm and you do have 160-mile-an-hour winds, which is hard in Galveston, though, because it gets so shallow so soon that they always tend to die out. And you can look at the 100-year history that it's hard for a strong windstorm to hit Galveston because it's so shallow as you come into the Gulf of Mexico off of Galveston. That's why the fishing isn't that great off of Galveston. You got to go to other places.
Fertitta moved quickly in making repairs and elevating all power and infrastructure to his facilities in preparation for the next storm. The Moody Gardens, one of the state's largest and most popular tourist destinations in Galveston, also received heavy damage. They too moved quickly in making repairs and bringing their entertainment complex back into service. Many residents who evacuated have not been able to return. It takes people to run and operate businesses, restaurants, and tourist attractions on the island. And with most of the city's homes damaged and many beyond repair, there are fewer places for residents and service industry personnel to live. The city has asked for the federal government's help to alleviate the housing problem. but it's happening slowly. State Representative Larry Taylor of League City calls it inexcusable.
Well, I think what you'll see, this is a perfect example that government works best, it's closest to the people. You know, our state government hasn't done as good a job as the local cities and counties have done, and the federal government has just been a total example of how not to do things. We're still waiting on some temporary housing from Hurricane Rita. That was 3 years ago. And I don't know how you call that temporary. We have people now that need a place to live while they're rebuilding and working in their businesses. You know, to get an economy back up and running, you got to have people here to do it. And if they have no place to live, and that's really where I think FEMA can step in with temporary housing. We know we have the resources here in Texas. We have manufactured housing units that can be built 3,000 a month, 4,000 a month, could be on the ground here in 30 days, and we're still waiting for temporary housing for Rita.
FEMA has provided trailers that Galveston residents have placed in front of their homes so that they can be close by to provide security and continue to repair their property. A representative from FEMA says they know there is much more that needs to be done, and the housing shortage remains a problem.
Yeah, that housing issue is critical. I mean, that's just where we are right now. You know, most people have gone through the registration process, gotten that first, salvo of money, but what's really going to be the key is getting people housed.
Fertitta says the housing issue needs to be addressed in order to get the people in Galveston back to work.
I think the biggest problem right now is that you got to get your workforce back. The population that you've really lost is your transient workforce that did not really own a home there, who could move to San Antonio or move to Austin or move to Houston and get a job, that they didn't lose a lot. The people that own homes there, the majority are coming back. Now, losing UTMB to any degree is huge because you're losing the doctors and you're losing the administrators that lived in Galveston and right off of Galveston. And so those are the things that you don't want to see happen. You don't want to lose that industry. But at the same time, Galveston's a tourist town. That's what it's going to always be, as a tourist town. And everybody down there needs to realize it.
Remarkably, along the Texas coast, many homes received little noticeable damage, while others nearby were heavily damaged or totally disappeared. Many say the state's building code had a lot to do with it.
It's absolutely amazing to go down there and look, and you'd see one home where it was substantively fine, and you go to the next home and it's gone. And you say, well, what's the difference? The difference was the building codes. For those that were built after 98 and the building code was enforced, it made a critical difference. I would say that the losses were at least 40 to 50% less for those homes that were built to code.
Starting in 1998, Texas coastal residents who built new homes and wanted windstorm insurance through the Texas Windstorm Insurance Association had to comply with new building code standards, which strengthen homes from top to bottom.
Rod goes all the way down through both floors and connects to your piling right under your floor joists.
To obtain flood insurance from the National Flood Insurance Program, the homes had pylon requirements that would elevate the homes out of harm's way. The building code would later be enforced for all municipalities, but not unincorporated areas. Even in these areas, if the homeowner wanted flood or windstorm insurance, their new home had to comply with the stronger building standards. The change was noticeable.
And I think Galveston is a great example that the beach houses that you lost in Galveston were the beach houses that were 20 and 30 years old. All the beach houses that were built in the last 10 years basically suffered no damage except some surge damage on the bottom where the pilings were and the garages were, but the homes didn't suffer any damage. And that is because of the great building code that we do have there. And I think we've all improved it again. I know things that we did when we built back Galveston and we've built back Kemah, that we're making other adjustments where certain things are going at a higher level than they were before.
Of the few remaining homes left standing on Bolivar Peninsula, many were built beyond code, conforming to a standard called Fortified for Safer Living and engineered by the Institute for Business and Home Safety, or IBHS. But not all of these homes withstood the storm. Franklin said the IBHS engineered homes are higher and stronger.
Just all the way around, it's built stronger, it's higher off the ground, and the current IBHS requirements actually go 3 feet above the base flood and 140 miles an hour. So it's kind of ramped up to really a code plus, I guess you'd say.
The president of the IBHS said Hurricane Ike proved that a stronger built home can survive a catastrophic storm.
The Fortified for Safer Living program really is a house-by-house commitment to building at a building code plus construction level. Having said that, we do work with developers who are building entire communities to the Fortified standard. In Texas, there are a couple of note that were both impacted by Hurricane Ike, Beachtown and Audubon Village. In both cases, what we saw was a group of homes that were constructed to our standard that survived very well when their neighbors' homes did not. Unfortunately, there were also a couple of fortified homes that were actually destroyed because their neighbors' homes, which had become debris, washed into their homes and destroyed them. So what did we learn? A couple of things. Number one, building right is absolutely essential and can work to preserve a home and a community. But secondly, unless there's a community-wide approach taken, some of those homes that are not as well built can in fact destroy the homes that are.
The director of the Texas Windstorm Insurance Association, Jim Oliver, said if he were building on the island, he would build a home that matched IBHS engineering standards.
I'd go and get what they call their hurricane-proof house. Nothing's hurricane-proof totally, but it's built with certain specifications that would survive a storm of this nature very easily. And it has concrete pilings, the roof is put on a certain way, the siding's put on a certain way, all the doors and windows are secured a certain way, so that you wouldn't impact resistant for everything, you know. So if you have flying debris, it'd be a little more expensive, but if I was going to do it, that's the way I'd build it. I mean, I'd rebuild it at the right height to make sure that in the most extreme storms, the surge goes under it, and that the structure itself survives winds up to, say, 130 or 40 miles an hour. If you get over that, you get Category 4 or 5 hurricane, that's a whole different deal. I don't think anybody's going to be able to build to that. That's like a tornado hitting your house. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. But yeah, I would rebuild to that. And I don't think it'd cost that much more, maybe 10% more, but it'd certainly be worth it if you're going to live in harm's way.
But Dr. Gilbert, a civil engineer and an expert on pylons, questioned what's to gain from owning one of these homes.
There's a row of homes in Bolivar it's just like the Three Little Pigs. All the wood homes are gone. And there's this row of 12 or so reinforced concrete structures that were up in the air, maybe 20 feet or 25 feet. And of those, the majority of them survived. They didn't all survive. Some of them were destroyed, and even the ones that did survive were damaged. I don't know if I'm that homeowner that I would be patting myself on the back at that point, because maybe my home is still there, but everything around it is gone, and my home is damaged, and they still don't have electricity there, and they still don't have water there. So I'm not sure what you really gained by having spent all that money, but you can, you know, it doesn't mean there's not another hurricane that's even stronger, that has an even bigger storm surge that might take it out. And the other issue is you can put your home so that it's at an elevation above the highest storm surge you ever think might happen, but when the storm surge takes out other structures, those structures can slam into your structure. And so I suspect that, you know, the row of homes that were all 25 feet up in the air, where 3 of them didn't make it, it might be that at least 1 or 2 of those had something hit it, some debris that was on top of the water and the waves during the hurricane. So it's a scary world we live in. You can't do things to make yourself completely safe.
Former State Senator Babe Schwartz was born and raised on Galveston Island, yet he sticks with his message that man ain't supposed to live on no island.
Some folks are rich enough and some folks are foolish enough to rebuild in the same place, on the same beach, on the same barrier island, where they lost their first and second and third home. But we ought not to invite people to do that.
Gary Kaufman served as president of the Independent Insurance Agents of Texas when Hurricane Ike struck his office in Galveston. Kaufman says you can look at history and determine how often a storm might strike, but that's no guarantee.
I think Florida taught us after they had 4 storms in 1 year. We had Rita, we had Katrina, now we've had Ike. Ike was a storm that we've never seen before in Galveston. I think people are going to be a lot more cautious. I think the insurance industry and companies are going to be more cautious when they look at the Gulf Coast and Barrier Island specifically, simply because we don't know if it'll be another 100 years or it could be again this year. The predictions are already out that we're going to have a higher than normal storm season even on the Gulf Coast. I think just as many people that think, well, I've been through my storm, I'm not going to have another one in my lifetime. For as many people that say that, there's probably just as many that say it could happen again this year, and we've got to be better prepared.
Hurricane Ike eroded miles of Texas beaches, and that could play havoc for homeowners wanting to rebuild. The Texas General Land Commission enforces the Texas Open Beaches Act, which makes it illegal for homes to be built within a certain distance from the ocean. For many homes, Hurricane Ike took away their beach, and that raised the prospect that the state may have to take the property.
Particularly in these areas where they're gone, where the structures are gone, and now let's say, quote, draw a line in the sand, say you can't build seaward of this. Now we get into other issues there. Is that a taking? Is that a regulatory taking? Is it a taking? And it can be done in such a manner that it's not, but really, why would you want to build a structure that's going to be on submerged land in 15 or 20 years? It doesn't make economic sense for the owner. But then again, if we say that, then they get particularly upset. But I think that if you look at what's happened, particularly in Bolivar Peninsula, the idea of setbacks is going to come in more favor than it was, 4 months ago.
Schwartz, who helped write the Texas Open Beaches Act, said coastal homeowners should not be surprised by what is happening along the Texas coast.
Absolutely. If you have a house on the first line or the second line of a beachfront or the third line since Hurricane Ike, you're faced with losing the title to that property to the state. Now, on the other hand, suppose some blessed event occurs and the beach accretes, and you get land in front of your beach you never had before. It belongs to you. It's free. God gave it to you. But God also may punish you and take it away from you.
Schwartz said Texas beaches have been eroding for years because of the lack of silt flowing into the Gulf of Mexico. Commissioner Patterson said his office will not be taking any action on acquiring beachfront property until the beaches recover from the storm, and that could be a year or longer.
The line of vegetation is the demarcation between where the public beach starts. So the line of natural vegetation seaward is a public access easement. And since there's no vegetation now, because it's wiped out, we've established an interim line to be used today. It's not an LOV, but we've basically ascertained that grass will not grow lower than 4.5 feet elevation along the Gulf frontage. So we've said, okay, this is our starting point. And then we're going to take another look at it in a year and see where it really is. And that's allowed us to move forward with reconstruction on some structures and try to say, okay, you can rebuild, you can make temporary repairs and wait, and to help people move forward with something that's definitive, even though it's not the final determinant.
Despite the devastation, coastal residents are looking to rebuild.
With rare exception, they want to rebuild, period. There's a few that don't. A few have told us they're moving back to Missouri because they retired there and back or whatever, but the vast majority want to rebuild. I'd say 95% want to rebuild.
Both city and Galveston County officials are doing what they can to assist homeowners in their rebuilding efforts, and that includes reducing red tape and fees.
The people that have to rebuild their houses to the current requirements feel like that they're being penalized, and of course there's a reason for it because a lot of them sustained a lot of damage, and had they been elevated and properly built, they would have been a lot less damage. That's probably the biggest gripe that we've gotten is, and we've tried to minimize the red tape, and the Commissioner's Court has waived the building permit fees and inspection fees for all Ike-related repairs and rebuilding, and so that's probably the biggest complaint that we have.
Many homeowners will have to raise their home even higher to meet federal guidelines even in the unincorporated areas that don't have to meet state building codes.
Well, counties don't have building code requirements because they're not authorized statutorily. And so it's a little bit different than the city, but if we did have building codes, we would have had less damage, there's no doubt about it. We have what's called a floodplain regulations because we participate in the flood insurance program, which means you have to elevate, and in coastal areas you'd have to have your piling so deep and you have to have the structure braced. But there are not building codes, it's floodplain regulations. Had we had building codes, we believe that the damage would have been less.
Any homes that have more than 50% damage must be rebuilt to the current elevation requirement if it doesn't presently meet that elevation. In some cases, the whole house will have to either be raised or removed and replaced. Commissioner Patterson said a beach home can be built higher and stronger, but still face major problems.
But even with the more stringent building codes, and even having been, elevation sufficient for the tidal surge went underneath, if the beach goes away and you find that structure now is, on state-owned submerged land or on the wet beach, if you will, that's another problem. So you can build to withstand the storm. You may not be able to build to where you can, survive the change in property line that occurs.
Schwartz warns coastal residents there will be another storm, so be prepared.
And when I say that it breaks my heart to see people who can't rebuild their homes, who had a right to expect to live in those homes all their lives. But I can't be heartbroken about people who ran the risk, knew the consequences, were given a subsidized insurance policy, and ran the risk anyhow, and said to hell with it. I don't think I'm ever going to see a 1900 storm. And we've seen it, and we got it right between the eyes, and we need to make sure that it doesn't happen to us again with the same consequences.
Kaufman had this advice for those planning to rebuild.
Being a coastal agent, wind and flood are things that we offer on every sales call with every one of our customers. In the past, people would say, I'm going to self-insure for flood. I don't think I'm ever going to get hit. What do you think? And my advice was kind of always the same, buy all you can buy. But I understood their mentality. I understood that they thought, well, I'm 17 feet in the air. The chance of having water in my house are pretty slim. I think now most all of us will be a little more forceful when it comes to, it doesn't matter how high you are, it doesn't matter where you're located, the water can find you, and you better make sure you're insured if you plan to build here.
Republic Group President Parker Rush says you can't prevent people from wanting to live on the coast, but they need to build stronger homes.
People will rebuild there. It's impractical to think that people won't rebuild there. They will. The professional side of me says, the insurance side of me says, boy, I wish they wouldn't. I wish they'd go further inland. But the personal side of me, I enjoy the beaches of Texas. It's a great place to go. I think the real situation is, can we develop the right building codes so that when these storms do happen, because they're going to happen again. This was not a one-time occurrence for Galveston, as everybody knows who's studied history. It's going to happen again, and we need to be able to construct our homes and businesses in such a way to withstand the storms.
The Texas Windstorm Insurance Association, or TWIA, consists of every insurance company that writes property insurance in Texas. It's TWIA that provides hail and windstorm insurance coverage for the majority of coastal homeowners. To pay claims for catastrophic storms, the money from TWIA comes from assessments levied on its member insurance companies, a catastrophe reserve trust fund, and reinsurance, which TWIA purchases to pay the claims from a potentially large storm. When Hurricane Dolly struck South Texas on July 23, 2008, insurance companies were assessed the first $100 million. Another $100 million came from the Catastrophe Reserve Trust Fund. To pay Hurricane Ike claims, TWIA used all of the funds in the Catastrophe Reserve Trust Fund, plus all of their $1.5 billion in reinsurance. Additionally, insurance companies were assessed $430 million, getting into the unlimited assessments for insurance companies. The cost to the state's general revenue fund through tax credits back to insurance companies will be $230 million, and that has many people concerned.
Well, I would think it'd be a big concern for two reasons. One, be the first $300 million the companies don't get reimbursed for, but after that, those tax credits would come back in if the legislation doesn't pass. So if there was another Ike, there could be tax credits in the neighborhood of $2 billion. It's one thing for the state to be short $230 million over a 5 or 6 or 7 year period. It's quite another to be short $2 billion or more. The other issue would be that the insurance industry would take a look at that and start questioning why are we doing business in Texas to write property insurance. I certainly would if I was an executive. I'd say, you know, we have the chance here of an unlimited assessment, you know, based on our percent of participation. And I would think that that would force some of the insurance companies to make serious decisions about cutting back their writings of property insurance in Texas so they wouldn't have as big an assessment.
One of the biggest challenges for TWIA will be determining windstorm claims on places like Bolivar Peninsula, where more than 3,400 homes and businesses disappeared. Oliver said insurance adjusters and engineers will have to determine how much wind damage occurred to each structure before it was carried away by the storm surge.
We call them slab claims, or can call them stick claims because there's a stick or two sitting up. But the courts have been very specific in Mississippi, Louisiana, and even here in Texas back in the 60s after Hurricane Carla. And what they indicate you have to do is look at each one individually, and you have to make an assessment as to what the wind damage is versus what the surge damage is. And the only way you can do it, as you suggest, when there's nothing there, which is very difficult. It's a very expensive and lengthy and time-consuming, which is hard for the consumer to get because they want to be paid right away.
So with many residents waiting for the final outcome on insurance claims and also waiting to see what happens with their beachfront, it'll take time for any significant rebuilding to take place. Meanwhile, Galveston County officials say they expect families will return to Bolivar Peninsula, but some changes will be required.
Yes, our Commissioners Court has declared that is their goal, is to bring back Bolivar and support all the things that need to be supported financially and otherwise to bring back Bolivar. We want to bring it back right, like maybe protect the shoreline, maybe raise the Highway 87 and things like that, make sure that the private structures are rebuilt properly, they're elevated, and they're built for the storm surge. A lot of the houses predated our building permit program, and of course those are the ones that were mostly damaged.
One of the biggest supporters in rebuilding Galveston is Tillman Fertitta. He thinks it'll be a long time before another catastrophic hurricane comes along.
What happened in Galveston this time is nobody can ever remember this happening since the 1900 storm when there was no seawall. And it really took the perfect thing happening of it going up the ship channel, and people need to rebuild because it isn't going to happen again where they're sitting in 8 feet of water in their house. It just, everything happened perfectly this time with this surge and how big the storm was and exactly where it hit. And people need to be optimistic. They need to build back. It just isn't going to happen anytime soon. It just isn't going to happen, and people need to move back to Galveston and not worry about it. And if it happens again in the next couple of years, then they need to worry about it.
The city of Galveston may have lost up to 30% of its population that once stood at 60,000 people. Galveston's taxable property base may also face the same decline, and that has the city implementing hiring freezes and salary reductions for its employees because of the hit on city revenues. The whole city looks to downsize.
Our businesses, if you go down to the Strand, or if you haven't been down there, you need to take a look because all of those places have been devastated. I was fortunate, I had 3 feet of water in my house. They had 8 feet of water in their businesses. And many of those folks, unfortunately, didn't have insurance. And so they're trying to decide if they even come back. Well, those businesses provided sales tax and property tax revenue to the city. And they also used our water and sewer services as well, and garbage. So Galveston, I think, unfortunately, is going to be affected very dramatically by a downsizing in its population base. I think ultimately it'll come back in a different form with the University of Texas Medical Branch downsizing and every other governmental entity, whether it's the school district, the county, the city, etc. I mean, everybody's going to have to downsize.
Commissioner Patterson said the entire rebuilding effort will be an economic decision at every level, and there will be changes and improvements made. He sees the catastrophe as a new opportunity.
Well, I don't think it's going to be back to the way it was. We hope to make it better. We hope to take this catastrophe and turn it into an opportunity. And the opportunity to do things from this point forward, to recognize that the coastal environment is different than other environments. That there are places that make sense to maybe build and places it doesn't make sense to build. That we need to look at things such as setback from the dune, the upland toe of the dune as far as construction. That we need to look at those places where beach renourishment does make sense and maybe where places where Mother Nature's course should be allowed to occur. So I think this is kind of a clean slate and a tremendous opportunity to look at what we do going forward. And again, the thing I want to emphasize is that there are people who say, well, you can't fight Mother Nature. We should just abandon and let Mother Nature take her course. Well, that's not necessarily the right choice in certain areas, because if we do nothing, highways will be severed, barrier islands will be severed, the intercoastal waterway will be severed, and at that point, we'll spend a boatload of money doing something about it. Whereas if we spend a little money today, we can save a lot of money later. And you can put a pencil to these projects. You can actually see and determine how much hotel motel tax you generate if you renourish a beach. Or you can actually see how much tax base you save if you avoid the destruction of some of the property along the coast. And in some places it comes out in the red, in some cases it comes out in the black. So it's an economic decision.
Mayor Thomas said Galveston has been devastated by the storm in many ways, but it will come back.
What is going on in Galveston is the fact that our budget is certainly impacted. Ad valorem taxes will be down, sales taxes down. And then when the state of Texas and the University of Texas Board of Regents laid off 3,800 people and shut down our hospital, which was already shut down by the storm, but they've left it shut down. The negative impact not only on Galveston and Galveston County, but this entire region is telling a tale that we did not have to tell. It's been devastating. No emergency room. We had a level 1 trauma center. It's only 3, there are only 3, 2 in Houston and 1 here. This one is gone. So Houston is now being impacted by all the patients that we can't take care of. They laid off almost 130 professionals. That represented a fair amount of our middle class. They've picked up their children and gone to other school districts. We got a long way to come back. But, the spirit is very good here. And as I heard, Steve telling you that we're on the road to recovery. It's just going to take a lot longer than we thought.
Galveston City Manager LeBlanc said the city has a wonderful history and a strong spirit, which has been challenged. And the question remains, when will the next catastrophic hurricane hit?
Physical things will ultimately be fixed. What I can't fix, the next step is the behind-the-scenes financial things that you don't see. But there's another thing that's even harder to fix, and that's the spirit and the desire to live here. I hate to say it, but many of the people, including some of my own family members, are questioning whether or not they want to stay in Galveston. And the basic question that they unfortunately can't answer is, or they can answer, and that is that it can happen again.
Hurricane Ike destroyed or severely damaged landmarks that had withstood numerous storms. The insured losses from Hurricane Ike may reach $15 billion, putting it right behind Katrina and Andrew as the costliest storm in U.S. history. Hurricane Ike was bad enough, but coupled with a struggling economy, it'll take years for Galveston, and especially Bolivar Peninsula, to recover. The storm took an emotional and financial toll on its victims.
Maybe also to my wife and to the lady folks, they may take this a little harder than us guys, but I've talked to some men that will sit down and cry over it when you get to go get your property. There's not much left.
In some cases, they're so discouraged they don't have the will to come back. We have neighbors that she absolutely can't be on the peninsula. It makes her physically sick because she saw everything she had destroyed and she doesn't know how to cope. She has not been able at this point to get over that.
This is the best place in the world to be. Just be prepared for the worst.
Funding for this program provided by Insurance Council of Texas.